Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be here. What a great format. Ali, you always do wonderful things, and I'm in really good company here tonight. So it's my job to talk about step one. It's not difficult for me to do that. I lived alcoholism, and I lived the things that it talks about in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And so it's not really difficult for me to share on step one. One of the things I want to start with, crazy enough, is a line or two from the chapter Working with Others. All right, if we're satisfied someone is an alcoholic and we're trying to help them, it says here, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Show them from your own experience how the queer mental condition surrounding the first drink prevents the normal functioning of willpower. In other words, every single one of us knew the risk of drinking, knew the consequences that could happen if we were drinking, knew how we felt the next morning, knew all the different kinds of trouble we got in, understood that it probably would be a good idea to not drink anymore, right? We all knew that, and we kept drinking. And so this first step talks about powerlessness. And that, it's difficult. I swear, alcoholics are stubborn. A lot of them, we know, before we know. And sometimes it's very, very difficult for us to believe that a problem has us completely licked. But I believe it's really important to get as close as you can to a complete concession to your innermost self about your level of powerlessness. I believe this is so important, because if I'm gonna join up with all of you, if I'm gonna run around and make coffee and get sponsors and take commitments and work the steps and find service stuff to do, if I'm gonna do all that, I'm gonna need a good reason to do all that. I'm not a joiner. You know what I mean? I'm an isolator. Alcoholism is an illness of isolation. I want to cut myself out of the tribe. I don't want to come running in and say, "Here I am, everybody." I want to like hide in my room somewhere and be by myself. So if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to engage in this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, this thing called recovery, I really, really need motivation. I need to be painted into a corner. So from my own personal experience, here's what happened with me that revolved around step one. The very first time I started drinking, what the Dr. Silkworth calls the allergy to alcohol, hit me the first time I drank. I'm maybe 13 or 14, right? And I start drinking, and I'm drinking with two guys, and they have, half a glass, two-thirds of a glass, and they're done. They're done. They've had enough. What happened to me was I kept drinking. And this was going to happen over and over again for 20 years. When I would start drinking, if alcohol remained available to me, I would continue to drink it. And I'd play mind games, and I'd tell you stuff like, "Well, I party, man. Don't you party? I party. I'm a hard partier." whatever. However I had to internalize this continuation of putting alcohol in my body, I would do. And how it presented in me was like this: the first drink would always do one thing. It would ask for the second drink. The second drink would insist on the third drink. The third drink would demand the fourth drink. And I wanted the 29th drink more than I wanted the 28th drink. So what happens with me is it's a phenomenon of craving, they call it, right? It's an internal condition where if alcohol is introduced to my body, I want more alcohol. And maybe I'm thinking about it. Maybe I'm thinking, well, I've had 7. I probably having 8 isn't a good idea. Maybe sometimes I think about it, but more often than not, I'm just grabbing the drink and drinking, just like it's normal. It's like breathing to me. Now, if you do that, it's going to cause problems. You're going to do drunk stuff. If you drink like that, you're going to crash cars. You're going to get divorces. You're going to catch the house on fire twice. You know what I mean? You're gonna piss people off. You're gonna show up at somebody's house and park on their cat, or you'll pass out on their couch, and in the middle of the night you'll rip down their window treatments to use as a blanket, and they'll wake up in the morning and they'll be really mad. I mean, all this kind of stuff is gonna happen if you drink like that. Okay. And it certainly happened to me. I got myself into some crazy situations. Now, understanding that when I start to drink, I get drunk, is that didn't tap my brakes for 20 years. I mean, it didn't stop me from putting the first drink in my body. Folks, I never took the first drink drunk. You know what I mean? So there's a second part to this powerlessness. And there's wonderful, the book Alcoholics Anonymous is vitally important for understanding the first step. It just is. I've never seen it explained in such understandable detail. So here's just a paragraph that talks about this. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. How about if that's true? How about if you are without defense against the first drink? How about if that choice is not gonna be part of your consciousness? How about if we have to get in touch with a power greater than ourselves that will release us of this merciless obsession? How about if that's true? Now, this is a tough concession. I work with a lot of guys. I've worked with so many knuckleheads. It's just unbelievable. And to get them to that point where they truly internalize that they're powerless over alcohol going back in their body, it's really, really a tough sell. Because at certain times, we don't have the ability to stay separated from alcohol. So at certain times, maybe we do. So that confuses this whole thing. Well, I quit drinking for a month last year. Okay, well, you started drinking again, right? Oh, yeah, but I quit drinking for a month. So we play all these games with this lack of choice in drink. And one of the people that took me through the steps years and years ago kept me considering my experience to the point where I finally came to the conclusion that that's my experience. My experience is at certain times, alcohol goes back in my body. I don't want it to. I want to quit drinking. I don't want to be drunk. Alcohol doesn't care if you don't want to drink it. If you have this case of alcoholism. Now, that's a problem. That's a problem. Okay, a big problem. You've got a big problem when you're drinking because you get tongue chewing, knee walking, not able to operate your own pants zipper drunk if you're anything like me, right? Every time, and it's always a debacle and embarrassing and humiliating. So I have a problem when I'm drinking. But my real problem centers in my mind. My real problem is separated from alcohol, I don't remain separated from alcohol. And that was my experience over and over and over and over again. And I showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to some meetings, and I thought that going to meetings was treating my alcoholism. And so for about 90 days, I'm going to AA, I'm going to outpatient, I'm doing all these things. I really want to separate from alcohol, right? I'm at a point now where I'll do things that I'm really uncomfortable with. I'll do things that are stupid and they're not going to work for me. I'm that willing, and I'm sitting in the chair of Alcoholics Anonymous groups, and I drank again. And folks, if there was a meter up on the wall, and I don't want to ever drink again meter, I guarantee I'd have had a higher score than anybody else in that AA meeting. That I didn't want to drink more than anybody in that meeting. I guarantee it. And all of a sudden I'm drinking again, and that is really a concerning experience. And I went back out for like 7 or 8 months, and I came back into Alcoholics Anonymous, and for one reason or another, I think this is the grace of God, I just did everything. I did everything you told me to do. I got a sponsor. I joined a home group. I shared, Chris, you got to start sharing, so I shared. You should have seen me, in the early days. Oh my God, people would be rolling their eyes. So I'm sharing, and I'm doing all this stuff. And I believe that massive amount of fellowship activity created an environment whereby I could remain sober for a finite period of time until a recovery program was exposed to me. And that happened in a crazy way. Somebody, gave me a set of Big Book Workshop stuff, and gave me a set of that, and I started listening to it, and it resonated with me. Here's the thing, folks. If you are what this book describes as a real alcoholic, the book Alcoholics Anonymous is going to speak to you. It just is. And you're going to read it over and over again. And each time you read it, it's going to be a deeper experience with the information in the book. If the book Alcoholics Anonymous does not resonate with you, you may not be an alcoholic. I would recommend trying trying a different pathway. Maybe Living Sober might be your book. You know what I mean? But this stuff resonates with me today. And this is the foundation of my understanding of what my problem is, alcoholism, and what the solution for alcoholism is. Now, what I want to do is something I normally don't concentrate a lot on. But what I want to concentrate on is after the dash. Okay, so it says, we admit we're alcoholic, and the dash that our lives have become unmanageable. We're powerless over alcohol, dash that our lives have become unmanageable. And I want to talk about that. Because alcoholism is so expansive. It touches every aspect of my life. I believe that today. And why I believe it is because of what changed when I underwent a recovery program. So things healed and changed, and things changed, and attitudes and outlooks on life changed. And all this, my personality was different. My thinking was placed on a much higher plane. I mean, there's all these millions of promises that happens when you actually engage in a recovery program, right? That's happened to me. And so the things that have changed in a really, really wonderful way have led me to believe that the causes and conditions of my alcoholism were basically this. I was experiencing a toxic level of self-consciousness in between drinks. And this is what this is what my unmanageability was about. It wasn't about the crash cars. It wasn't about the divorces. It wasn't, it wasn't about, showing up and coming to in jail, not knowing why I'm there. But that was drunk stuff, right? Non-alcoholics do drunk stuff. That was all drunk stuff. And yes, it was external unmanageability, right? But the real problem, I believe, is spiritual in nature. So after the dash is explaining to me that my life is unmanageable. Why is my life unmanageable? Because I'm managing it, and I'm not managing it based on spiritual principles. I'm managing it based on this toxic experience of self-consciousness. So what does that look like? What does this toxic experience of self-consciousness look like? Well, it was all over me, sober in the AA groups in my first 6 months. Okay, I was a mess in my first 6 months. Not very many people sat next to me in my first 6 months. So what it was my head would just not stop. It would be rehashing things that happened in the past. Like, I can't believe, yesterday was just all, and what I should have said to that guy, 8 years ago, and all of this noise is constantly in my head. Those bastards. I can't believe you. You wouldn't believe that. Listen, it just isn't fair. These people, they just took advantage of me. They did me wrong. And this is just constantly in my head, right? So that what that is that's manifestation of self defeating me. Okay, ripping any kind of quality I could possibly have out of my life. Now, if I'm not like toxically rehashing the past in a negative way, I have anxiety about the future. And they call it fear in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it's more akin to what we would experience today as anxiety. And what that would look like is this. Yeah, I told my buddies that I'd meet them out there. I'd go to the wedding, and I don't know. I just don't feel like it. I'm not going to go. And I know I told my buddy I would go over and help him paint his house. But I hate painting, and this guy's calling me up. He wants me to help him move. I don't want to help anybody move. I don't want to do it. I'm just going to stay home. Okay, that's how my toxic experience of anxiety is going to defeat me. It's going to keep me from being where I need to be, doing what I need to do every time. And so, I come to in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm a bad electrician working for a crappy contractor with a $100 car, living at mom's, and it's because I was never going to be where I needed to be doing what I needed to do. I can't go back to, I know I didn't finish college, but if I go back to school, there's going to be a course. I know there's going to be a course that I can't pass, and I'll waste all that money. I'll waste all that time. And so these are the voices in my head. And these are manifestations of self that are defeating me. I believe they're my alcoholism. I believe they are the motor of the dysfunction in my life and the unmanageability in my life. And I believe that because I've overcome them today. I've healed from them today through the 12-step process that's laid out in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So listen, if the solution works, then whatever the solution is working against is part of the illness. I have to believe that. I have to believe that. Now when I'm working with other people, I spend a lot of time on step one. And I believe the instructions in, working with other people is in the chapter Working with Others, right? But I want to give the people I'm working with, if they are alcoholic, a lot of times they're not, I want to give them a fatal dose of alcoholism. When we're talking about step one, I want to get them past the delusion that somehow, someday, they're going to be able to beat the game. That this time, knowing what I know now, this time, it'll be different. I want to wipe away all of that as a belief system. And if I do that, I believe I've done my job helping somebody come to terms with step one. Listen, folks, step one is applicable to so many things, right? I mean, step one is the problem statement. What is the problem? The problem is I know better and I can't do better. Where is the power to be able to do better? I don't have it. And this is applicable in so many areas of our life. It's so applicable that the 12-step recovery process has been copied in something like 300 different ways. There's something like 300 different 12-step fellowships. There's overeaters, there's Sex Addicts Anonymous, there's Tower Snipers Anonymous. So if you start to get the urge to lock and load and climb the tower, you can call your Tower Sniper sponsor. I mean, there's just so many ways to identify that I just don't personally have the power. Haven't you said like 100 times, oh, I know, but you haven't been able to put it together, right? So helping somebody to truly understand that a Tony Robbins book, or a set of affirmation, tapes are just not going to do it. We have a fundamental lack of power. And I believe the rest of the 12 steps, there's some wonderful speakers over the next couple of weeks. God, and most of them are my friends. I can't wait to hear Jenn, who's, after me. She's a good friend. And we're going to be talking about overcoming something that they used to reference as hopeless. Until Alcoholics Anonymous, until the 12 steps, until the big book, most of the time, if you were diagnosed with alcoholism, it was a fatal diagnosis. You might die quickly, you might die slowly, but it is going to take you out. And we have this opportunity to recognize the enormity of our problem, use that as motivation to engage in the rest of this recovery process that we are not going to understand when we go into it. We're not going to want to do it. None of these steps are something we were just about to do before we showed up in AA. You know what I mean? So we're going to need some motivation. And I believe this hopelessness is motivation. I want to tell a couple of stories. When I'm working with somebody on step one, I've got a couple of stories that I basically tell, to show how alcoholism, shows up in me. Now, here's one of the phenomenon of craving. Okay, I'm 17 years old and I've got a 15-year-old girlfriend, and she invites me over to her house after school one day. Okay, and she makes the unforced error of asking me if I want a drink. This is like right after school, and I say sure, and she goes, "How about gin?" Okay, so I go sure, absolutely, I'll have some gin. So what she does is she takes like a 16-ounce glass, puts like 2 ice cubes in it, and fills it up with gin, which was not a good move on her part. So within about an hour and a half, I am passed out drunk on her couch, and her parents come home. Yeah, you know what I mean? Oh, this is my boyfriend. I don't think he'll be waking up anytime soon. It was a debacle. And did I want to get that drunk, knowing that I was supposed to meet the parents. No, another time I started drinking because it would help me go to motor vehicle and get my driver's license back for a third DUI. And I hated cops. I hated the lights. I didn't like standing in line, detested paperwork, had to do all that stuff, right, to get my license back. And so I started drinking. By the time I got to motor vehicle, I was drunker than a hoot owl. And I go in there, I want my license back, for a 30. They're like, did you drive here? Now, where would something like that fall on a stupid meter? Yeah, you know what I mean? Getting really drunk to go get your driver's license back for a DUI. I mean, it would have pinned the needle on the stupid meter. But I'm not a stupid person. I'm a powerless person, right? So that's when I start drinking. When I'm not drinking, I'll tell everybody I'm done. I'll go to AA. I'll go to outpatient. I'll sign myself into treatment. But if I'm not engaged at a really, really intense level in this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, the time and the place comes and I put alcohol back in my body. And the last story I'll tell you is I'm in AA for 90 days. I'm going to outpatient. I've told my boss and my family I'm done drinking. I'm done drinking. And I'm even going to all this stuff. That's how I feel about all this. And the thought crosses my mind that, all this AA stuff I'm doing, I bet if I bought a gallon of vodka and I drank it, it would remind me of why I'm doing all this. And it would act as extra motivation for me to really engage with this Alcoholics Anonymous thing. So I did that. I went and I bought a gallon of vodka and I started drinking it to improve my sobriety. I mean, I did not want to drink. The only reason I was drinking was to not drink. So I drank to not drink. Now, what that taught me was my illness rests in my mind. At certain times, I do not have what it takes to stay separated from alcohol. And I need you. I need all of you. I need a recovery program. I need service commitments. I need to be busy. I need to be helping other alcoholics. I need to be doing all that. And what comes from that is a release. I'm released from this obsession, not fighting it anymore. I'm released from it. And I want to thank Ali for asking me to join an incredible group of speakers and an incredible event. Thank you so much, Ali. And I can't wait to hear Jenn.
You're on the floor.
Thank you so much, Anna and Ali and everybody else on the team. Thank you so much for putting this on, and really grateful to be a part of it. Chris, you're one of my favorites, as you know, and just make me smile. I love it. We're not a glum lot, right? And that's what I get absolutely every time I listen to you. But I'm Jenn T. I am a grateful member of Al-Anon, the worldwide fellowship of it, which these Zoom rooms and other online meetings have really proven that to me, a worldwide fellowship. And it's been a beautiful thing to me, this whole recovery online thing, because I've had the opportunity to take what was so graciously given to me locally and add to it and expand it. And I love that. I'm going to start by saying, I'm speaking on step one, admitted we're powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. And when I first came around, I was around AA because I was with my loved ones in those rooms. And I didn't understand why, that step would apply to me, because I'm not powerless over alcohol. For me, I can take a drink, take it, leave it, doesn't matter. But I've come to understand it and for me, really experience it, both in terms of alcohol and my alcoholic loved ones, but also I'm powerless over so many other things. A lack of power is my dilemma, and I truly believe that, and so that step for me, we admitted we were powerless over, I could have a fill in the blank. And that could be food, not food, men, women, my daughters, my son, my fears, my delusions. You know, you stick it in there, and that's what I'm powerless over. And it's funny, you know, Chris talks about, you know, you take alcohol away, and an alcoholic has trouble living sober. Well, welcome to Al-Anon. Like, that's what we are, right? Effectively, a bunch of dry drunks. The lovely thing, and you may not agree about being an alcoholic, is that a lot of your stupid, horrible harms were caused when you were drunk. Stone cold sober. I've done a lot of the same stuff. Mine's just a lot quieter and more manipulative. And it comes in the form of help. Let me help you. I'm going to help you to see how you're going wrong. I'm going to help you to see why it should be done this way. I'm going to help you to understand. Let me just share my experience on this. And that's not in a selfless way. It's completely selfish. Although for me in my disease, I never recognized the selfishness of it. You know, let me help you to understand why that relationship choice is a terrible one. I should really replace that sentence with, let me help you to understand how you are going to be the solution to my fears about what might go on if this doesn't go the way I want it. And that's, you know, I have a good friend in AA who he would say to me, you're sure you're not an alcoholic? Because this makes no sense. You're nuts. Like, it's, you know, you're nuts. And I am when I'm in my disease. I'm nuts. I don't have a problem with the word, you know, restore me to sanity and two, because I'm insane. And I see a lot of it. Again, stone cold sober. Why? Because alcohol isn't the problem. Alcohol is why you have a seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. Control is why I have a seat in Al-Anon, or at least that's what I believe, is I don't reach for a bottle. I reach for something that is going to control the outcome that I need or think I need to be okay, you know, to return me to a place of ease, which explains why it's a dis-ease, right? So for me, untreated alcoholism, yeah, I've got it. I don't have the obsession with alcohol. I don't have that craving, but I have an obsession with outcomes. I have an obsession with you. If you are in my wake or in my path, I have an obsession with you always, you know, being the mirror to me of the things that I don't know to be true about myself. And that's where you know, my powerlessness, gosh, I don't, you know, I'll reach for men, or I used to reach for men to prove to me that I was lovable and beautiful and funny and smart. And as it turns out, those were just, you know, bottles with legs, effectively, that I'm treating this untreated alcoholism or spiritual malady or problem with ego or selfishness and self-centeredness rooted in fear, right? And that for me is where my disease sits. And I didn't see it before I came around these rooms. And, you know, part of what I loved about Al-Anon was our traditions that told me, you know, the only requirement for membership was a problem of alcoholism in a loved one or friend. And that's a beautiful thing, because it you know, it shows us exactly why we are here in our rooms. But my disease grabbed onto that and said, you are the reason that I am here. And you might have been the reason that I walked in the doors, although that wasn't necessarily the case for me, because my alcoholics were all sober while I was getting worse and worse. Well, most of my alcoholics were, but I will blame you every single time rather than become constitutionally honest with myself. And so I'm an Al-Anon, you know, I'm an Al-Anon because that's where I have a seat. But boy, I do not ever question that I am my own qualifier. I do not question that I suffer from the family disease of alcoholism, because it was coursing through my veins, I think, long before I ever even knew what alcoholics or alcoholism was. And I saw that in my life. I see it in my life today too, when I'm not spiritually fit, and I work a program, and that's a beautiful, remarkable thing. But for me, in the beginning coming in, I loved the relief of the meetings. I loved the relief of the fellowship. I loved it. A bunch of people who understood all of these things that people had done to me. And, we could all sit together and rejoice in our victimhood. And I should have a room lined with trophies in terms of my victimhood. I'm an Olympic champion victim. I can tell you that, gold medal every time. And that's my disease, and the 12 steps for me, starting with step 1, admitting that I am powerless over a lot of things. But for me, really, first and foremost, my fear. I am powerless over those fears that drive me to demand an outcome of my life, of you, of this situation, of them, my neighbor, of whatever. And I'm a business minder. I didn't need God when I came into these rooms. I had God. It was me. I just didn't realize that. I was God. My life wasn't unmanageable because I was a fabulous manager. Your life was unmanageable. So I was a fabulous manager for you too, whether you asked me to be or not. It did not make much difference. I was going to manage your life. I was going to, insert my will. Because if you did what I thought I needed you to do, then I would feel better. Again, not a bottle, but I'm reaching for that external solution. And I'd love to say I don't do it today. That would be a lie. I'm just so grateful in Al-Anon we do not give silver chips, because they'd have to be like 5-minute chips, because that's about how often I relapse. Less so in my actions, but certainly in my thoughts. And coming in, I used to think that, that the recovery was going to look like rainbows and unicorns. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it absolutely does. But life on life's terms is sometimes really tough, especially when I think I know. I think I know what this is about. I think I know how this is supposed to go. I think I know what you're going to do and what you should do. And which is why, as an Al-Anon, I plan 47 different ways that it could go and how I'm going to fix it or help you to straighten out to the course, of course, that I think it should be. And that for me is where I get into real trouble today. That's the unmanageability, because it's not a lack of knowledge, as Chris said. For me as an Al-Anon, lack of knowledge is not my problem. My problem is a lack of power, to not be driven by those fears, to not be driven by the delusions or old ideas or illusions or prejudices or whatever you want to call them, to follow my thoughts or my feelings. And that's the thing, my feelings, and I've heard this somewhere in the rooms, probably from Schroeder, my feelings are real, but they're not reality. And one of my problems in my disease, where unmanageability comes in, is when I think my feelings are reality. This morning, I had a relapse. Pick up my silver chip after the meeting. I had a relapse this morning. Because my partner, who is a lovely human being, whose murder I have planned at least 10,000 times, my partner didn't tell me something. And I immediately felt disrespected and ignored and invisible, and all of the things. Give me any synonym of any of those words, but a good one to describe it would be, I felt powerless. And instead of God or the 12 steps, I reached for me and my self-will. And what that looked like was, have a fear that I'm unworthy or unlovable or ignored or not worth being considered or any of those other things that my disease tells me. And I'm under the delusion that I know what this is about, that he has purposefully, not told me these things. And my mind immediately goes, that doesn't work for me. So here's what's going to happen. And then I blasted him for it. And I'd love to say Chris is clearly far more spiritual, far more recovered than I am, because yeah, Chris probably didn't do that today, but I did. And I work a pretty good program. But man, do I slip into that delusion that I have power over the things over which I am powerless. And when I'm not right with God, when I am not connected, which I wasn't this morning because I was late getting up and I didn't do my morning stuff, and Jenn was running the show. When I'm not connected with God, I'm separated from God, which means I'm separated from me, which means I'm separated from you. And my disease runs the show. And that looked like me ripping my partner and belittling and demeaning and shaming and making a big damn deal out of something that really wasn't a big deal. And then, of course I go, oh, now I need to apologize and make amends, which I really hate because he's actually the problem here. But I at least, when I relapse now, I at least have this program of recovery and this God that I return to when I remember I'm not him. And I forget that. So, I had the benefit of being around the rooms of AA. I had before coming into Al-Anon, and I had the benefit of a couple of good friends that took me through the book. And it amazes me, that me, an Al-Anon, not a drinker, never, done the running naked through the streets or, climbed into somebody else's bed and, peed on their pillow in the middle of the night. That's not my experience. But I want to show you my book and you'll have a laugh. This is my big book, which is not conference approved literature, but it's very much a part of my recovery. This is how you know I'm an Al-Anon. This is my big book, and it's marked up and I love it. And I say, if my house burns down, I get my kids first and my pets second and my big book, and then my husband and my shoes might come first, but husband's somewhere down there. But this is my big book, right? And when I flip to page 51, so here's, all of this stuff about, more about alcoholism and Bill's story. And this stockbroker in the 30s who's a drunk. And I'm reading through and I'm going, yeah, I don't drink like that. But wow, is this me? I think like him. I just choose different solutions. And then I get to page 51 and, and I'm reading this book and it's like, how does this make sense? Because I'm not an alcoholic. How can a book where the literal title is Alcoholics Anonymous, how can it possibly apply to me? And I get to page 51 and it says, leaving aside the drink question. And after that, this book tends to talk about what alcoholism looks like when you take the drink away. And that's me, a dry drunk, right? I'm just not in danger of any return to alcohol because I was never there. But I sure am in danger of alcoholism in my life. And, I see that today. I saw it when I first came in, not as well. I had the benefit of some friends who would very graciously be willing to tell me how sick I was, and I would argue and, slam doors and you don't understand. it's my favorite. But you don't understand, right? I'm so unique. I'm so different, but I'm not. My disease will eat me alive if I'm not watching for it. My disease will eat me alive if I don't know what that looks like. But knowing what it looks like does not equate to any more power. And that's why for me, the rest of these steps are how I continue to concede powerlessness. You know, I was under the delusion this morning that I have power, that I could figure things out, that I knew how it was supposed to be, that those feelings were actually real. And it became unmanageable. I said some really cruel things to a person that I love very much. And I was a person that I don't believe God wants me to be. And the funny thing for me, you know, I used to kind of picture, you know, here's me and here's God, and this is the stuff that blocks me. Not today. Here's me and here's God, and the stuff that blocks me is inside, you know, and it's an inside job. I am that agent of God when I seek to be that. I am the person who can find forgiveness for things that on the surface seem unforgivable. I have the power to do that when I am linked with a God that I didn't think I needed, nor did I want. You know, it has changed my life, and my life becomes more manageable, not because I am managing it, because I am letting go of managing it. But even sometimes letting go is one of those things that I'm struggle to do, that I'm powerless over, which is why for me, it's about the discipline around the steps. It is about, you know, my 12th step work, trying to carry the message to others, working knee to knee for me with an Al-Anon, because they are a reflection of me. They are a reflection of my powerlessness and my unmanageability. As long as I seek to identify with, rather than doing what my disease wants me to do, which is separating from. You know, I seek God through these 12 steps, and, you know, God of our own understanding. And that was a great thing that served me. You know, I had served a different God. I'd served my feelings. I served my fears. And now I serve this God that I can't really describe. God for me is just there. But the beauty of the 12 steps is it isn't a God of my understanding, it's a God of my experience. And when I experience God, I recognize my powerlessness better. And I don't have to go there. I recognize the unmanageability. And for me, that is my untreated alcoholism. I mean, those terms are interchangeable to me. But those are my thoughts and my actions that follow when my thoughts, you know, I have a choice with every sort of feeling or thought. Although sometimes it feels like I don't, but I have a choice. I can either serve God, discipline through the steps that brings me to God, or I will be serving myself. There's no middle ground for me. There's no middle ground. And for me, you know, fear, it really drives everything. It really is the root, I believe, of my disease. And when I first did my first inventory, my 4th step, I have 5 fears listed: spiders and heights and water and I don't even remember the other. Oh, snakes and bare mattresses, which is a weird one, but 5 fears. That was it. Now, like, my fear around my children, my fear around what people think of me as a mother when my children make decisions that I don't like, my fear around finances, my fear around, you know, being 52 and menopause kicking my ass and what that looks like literally for my ass, you know, things like that. Like, I have fears that for me, if if I listen to those and those are my truth, I'm not anywhere close to God. I am God, and I am serving those fears. All I have some days is discipline to these steps, is working through with other people. And I need to do that. Sponsoring for me is such a big thing because, it makes me laugh every time that somebody's like, oh, I can't imagine my life without you. I'm like, how on earth are you under the delusion that I am more helpful to you than you are to me? Because without them, my disease, part of my disease is that I'm blind to my disease. It's shape shifting, and the powerlessness and unmanageability. I'll think things are gone, and then they resurface, and one step to the left and there's my disease, and a little shuffle to the right and there's my disease, and I don't know it. And my life is unmanageable when I'm living in that. The big book talks about the bedevilments, having trouble with personal relationships, and can't control our emotional natures. Well, yeah, that was this morning. You all should have been at the cottage with me this morning. That was me, right? I'm smack dab in the middle of disease, thinking in self-righteousness and indignance and justification and blame. I'm not unmanageable. I'm right. And I might be sometimes. But there's a difference between being right and being serene. And that, to me, is the goal. A friend used to say, my goal is peace. And I think, you're an idiot. My goal is happiness. My goal is, everything that I want coming true in my life. Now, yeah, I get it. Because I used to think, that recovery looked like, calm amidst the storm. I now recognize I'm the frickin' storm. I am the storm. I didn't know I was the stupid storm, but I am. God is the calm amidst the storm. And I have to get plugged into that, because otherwise my life is unmanageable. I am out there causing harms to other people. Stone cold sober, still pointing the finger at you idiot alcoholics is the problem. And it's me all along. God's got jokes, man. And I love it. I have a beautiful relationship with God where, there are days where I'm like, I'm furious with you, and I hate this. I hate that I'm powerless. I hate that me turning things over thanks so much, feels unmanageable to me. I hate it. But somehow working these 12 steps that came out of a book from freaking alcoholics, they work in my life because I suffer from a spiritual malady. I'm blocked from everyone and everything. And then I use everyone and everything thinking it will be enough. And it never will be. And I have caused lots of harms in my life. That's what unmanageability has looked like, when those unmanageable thoughts become unmanageable actions, which they do every time I'm in my disease and without God, because it's like the yellow brick road. That looks like a path. And I somehow don't recognize that I'm on this disease trail. But that's where I go. And so I take this first step to the best of my ability. I admit that I'm powerless over alcohol, a zillion other things, and that my life has become unmanageable and will remain unmanageable if I don't continue through these steps. And, for me, I believe step 1 is about becoming constitutionally honest with myself. I had no idea how dishonest I was with myself. It just seemed to me that I was right, that I knew, and I didn't. And And working the rest of the steps continues to show me my step one, you know, the whole idea of step one and what it is. And I have to continue to experience it, because if I think of, for me, what my powerlessness looked like, you know, a few years ago when I came in, or what unmanageability looked like, I don't know, what month is it? September, in August, you know, I'm going to miss it, because that disease, cunning, baffling, and powerful, it'll take a step to the left. And if I'm not watching for it, if I'm not asking God to help me see it, if I'm not asking others to help me see it by seeking to see me in them, I'm in deep trouble, because I'm on that yellow brick road with my very fancy red shiny shoes, under the grand delusion that I'm managing well. And it's a dangerous thing. I want to read to you, because I know, you know, we've got this great thing with alcoholics about Al-Anons, just sit around and bitch and complain about their alcoholics. That's what Al-Anon's about. Sometimes you're right, absolutely. And I kind of had that. And I kind of thought, if I'm going to do that in a stinky church basement, I might as well just stay in my bathrobe at home and on my couch, because I can do that at home all the time, and I do. But our rooms, you know, when we find the 12 steps in our rooms, and those are rounded out by the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts, what a beautiful place to be. What a beautiful place to be able to see my powerlessness and the unmanageability that results when it manifests in my life, and make that right, you know. So I just wanted to read to you, you know, this is how Al-Anon works, and it's page 45 on step one, and just a part of a paragraph that says, life is unmanageable whenever we lose perspective about what is and is not our responsibility. We take offense at actions that have nothing to do with us, or we intervene where it's inappropriate and neglect our legitimate obligations to ourselves and others. Our misplaced concern for others becomes intrusive, meddling, resented, and doomed to failure. Step on the toes of others and they retaliate, kind of stuff. Instead of helping those we care about, we demonstrate a lack of respect for them and create discord in our relationships. Dry drunk, untreated alcoholism, right? Take the bottle away. And that's all of us. That's all of us. And so for me, you know, I think desperation drives most people into whichever 12-step room they land in. Certainly for me, it did. But willingness, you know, willingness takes over for a little while. But it has to be replaced by humility. And for me, part of that humility comes when I actually concede powerlessness and the unmanageability that it looks like on a day-to-day basis for me. Because my disease is never gone. It's lying in wait. And so that means my relationship with God has to be first and foremost in my life, because otherwise I'm serving the wrong master for sure. Thank you for having me. Ali, thank you so much for everything you do for the recovery community. Chris, you've changed my life, and I'm grateful.